cricket is also such a game of very deep rooted traditions, timing, this, that and the other. Once talking to some cricket umpires, the people who have kind of stood at Ranji matches and things like that. I was talking to them about the clock at the Brabant Stadium, and one of them kind of told me like how he never used to wear a wristwatch because he knew that the clock was there. Brabant has actually two clocks, one inside. There used to be one on the outside as well, which most people have actually forgotten. And I remember it was one of those great lessons for me, where you don't procrastinate but you go out and shoot. And I kept looking at this clock and thinking, I'm going to go and shoot it next Sunday. And then you realize that the tree has grown too much, it's covering it. So it's okay, I'll wait for the trimming to happen during pre-monsoon, then I'll go and shoot. And, years went by just completely procrastinating. And then one fine day, the clock was gone, during repairs. So, it's one of those great regrets. So, the thing about the clocks is, we must also understand that, time is also seen. These clocks were really looked at as colonial kind of imports, So there's an anecdote about the Crawford Market clock tower. About during the freedom movement, during a protest, somebody had actually fired a gun at the clock of the Crawford Market. There are kind of very interesting things that were revealed during research and over the years. There's an interesting paper that was written by this gentleman, a historian called Jim Massalos, which talks about time in India, and this might be of interest. So time got standardized in India in about 1905, and in the few years just before that, there were three different kind of time which was being followed in the city of Bombay. Okay, obviously adding to a lot of confusion and things like that, but that's how it was. So for instance, there was something called as Bombay time. Bombay time was what was local time as per the position of the sun. So Bombay time would be different from Calcutta time, from Delhi time, Chennai time and whatever. There was something called the Indian mean time. Okay, so if you can visualize undivided India, you would probably, Chennai would probably come somewhere in the middle. Okay, in that triangle. There used to be an observatory in Chennai, and the technology that existed at that time was that from here, it was the only place where they could transmit time in real time across the subcontinent. So this was a form of standardization in a way, and this timing was known as Indian mean time, and it was followed by the railways, the postal telegraph department. So what you had was like, say, buildings in Bombay which came under the railways. Okay, they all followed Indian mean time. If post offices had a clock, there aren't any, but I'm just saying, if post offices had a clock, then they would be following Indian mean time. There was a third time which was called as port signal time, and this was synchronized to GMT. Okay, in 1900, shipping was the big thing, right? All trade happened through shipping. People moved around the world on ships. So port cities were important: Bombay, Karachi, Calcutta, Madras, that kind. So this was a time so there were certain clock towers, which came under the ports, okay, the port authorities, and those buildings had followed port signal time. So there was a clock tower which still is there, it doesn't work, but there was a metal ball which used to drop and visually all the ships which were docked on the eastern waterfront of Bombay, they would kind of set the clocks on their ship. So you can imagine the confusion that must have existed. Okay, like Bombay time, for instance, say local shops would be using it. I mean, things like that. Fire temples in Bombay, Parsi fire temples, for instance, always used local time. So, for instance, prayer time in Bombay would be different from prayer time in Calcutta. So we found something very interesting. We were photographing in a particular Atash Bairam in Bombay, and one of the priests told us how they have a grandfather clock on the premises, which kind of runs on Bombay time, not Indian Standard Time. There's also something very interesting. So the main fire temple of the holiest of them, which is in Udwada, that also kind of runs on Bombay time, because there was no Gujarat then. I mean, it was all Bombay Presidency. So all of it kind of ran. So it still runs on Bombay time, it seems. Black and white was a more forgiving technology. So when you're new and you're technically still a little unsound, so when I would have goof ups, I mean, I could at least salvage things in the dark room. First job, not much money, you're trying to go out and shoot something on your own. Black and white seemed more affordable. Second, I mean, these were early practical considerations. So color, I mean, we used to shoot color transparencies. It's something I wasn't even considering then, because it was just way too expensive to do on my own. One of the other things is I find shooting in India kind of a huge challenge in terms of color, for instance. If you're doing street photography, all that, I mean, it's a different way of approaching the problem, right? I mean, and I'm always thinking of it as a problem-solving exercise. Like I was saying, I think photography at the end of the day is a problem-solving exercise. So here, I mean, the problem that I had to always consider was, is the clock visible in your photograph? That's the focus, right? So I could be photographing Crawford Market in all its hustle and bustle and busy activities. But the thing is, if I can't spot the clock, then I mean, I think it's a failed kind of exercise. So color, I think, was getting in the way of that. I think there's just too much of tarpaulins, I mean, plastic tape, I mean, all kinds of things, clothes hanging, all kinds of things happening, Thirdly, I mean, and this I'm saying is the more recent phenomena, which is, given, over the last, let's say, decade or so, seeing the kind of constant haze that kind of hangs over Bombay. It's become a kind of bit of a nuisance to kind of do this kind of photograph. Obviously, if you're trying to do a photograph on the street, trying to show city pollution, it obviously doesn't matter. But I'm saying here you're kind of working with a specific agenda, and I think I find it more difficult to shoot with color in this kind of scenario. That the sheer inconsistencies of light and lighting conditions and all. So I've just chosen to continue what I had begun and continue in black and white. So no other reason really. I mean, I have been called the clockman of Bombay. I've been called the timekeeper of Bombay. I've been called all kinds of things. There are a few others I forget now. In newspapers and stuff like that. I mean, I don't mind it. I mean, it's kind of amusing. It's certainly not what I had thought as a title, when I kind of started out as a photographer. But I think, I mean, I'll go with it. I mean, I'll go with it. So, I mean, no regrets on that front.